The convoy moved slowly through Sector 9. It was a peaceful mission. There were no weapons on board. Only cargo ships filled with food, medicine, and a few hundred civilians. Most of them were families heading to a new colony called Haven 3. The escort was small, just 2 light patrol ships flying at the front and back. Commander Rhea sat in the lead patrol ship, watching the stars through the glass. She had done this mission many times before. No danger, no problems. Sector 9 had always been quiet. "This is Eagle 1 to Convoy," she said through her comms. "All systems green. Stay in formation." "Copy that," answered one of the civilian pilots. Everything seemed normal. The space around them was empty, cold, silent. But something was wrong. Rhea felt it. It started as a strange flicker on her radar. A shadow, then gone. At first, she thought it was a glitch. Then another blip appeared. And another. They were getting closer. "Control, I have unknown signals at 2 o'clock, she said, her voice calm but firm. No answer. "Control, do you copy?" she repeated. Still silence. Then it happened. From the darkness of the Kuro's belt, several black ships uncloaked. They didn't send any warning or message. They just opened fire. Bright red lasers flashed across the stars. One of the escort ships exploded in seconds. A civilian transport was hit next. Fire and debris spread in every direction. "Evasive maneuvers," Rhea shouted. "Get those ships out of here." Panic spread fast. Civilians screamed through the comms. Some tried to escape, but the enemy ships were faster. The attackers moved like predators, cutting down anyone who tried to run. Rhea pulled hard on the controls and dove under one of the transports. Her ship shook from the blast waves, but she managed to dodge the next shot. She looked at her screen. The attackers were marked now, Volker Dominion. Of course, the Volker. They were an old enemy of Earth. The Galactic Council had stopped their wars long ago, but now they were back. And they had chosen a civilian convoy as their target. "This is Commander Rhea," she said, switching to emergency broadcast. "We are under attack. Civilian ships hit. Sector 9, sending ashfall signal." She hit the red button on her console. A small device hidden deep inside the ship sent a silent signal back to Earth. It was an old protocol. Code ashfall. Earth would know. But help wouldn't come in time. More enemy ships arrived. The Volker weren't here to rob. They were here to destroy. Another civilian ship exploded. One escape pod launched just before the blast. Rhea locked onto it. "Pod 17, stay with me," she said. "I'll cover you." She flew between the pod and an enemy fighter, firing the last of her ship's defense rounds. Her shots hit, but the enemy kept coming. Rhea knew her ship was not built for battle. She had one last option. She changed direction and flew straight at the biggest enemy ship. The Volker vessel turned to face her. It was 4 times the size of her patrol ship. Rhea opened a direct channel. "This is a convoy of civilians. You've made a mistake," she said. The Volker captain appeared on her screen, laughing. "Humans are weak. We will burn your worlds one by one," he said. Then the screen went black. They'd fired again. Her ship was hit. Flames burst from the engine. She lost control and began spinning toward the moon near the belt. Rhea reached for the pod eject but stopped. If she left now, the pod would be easy to spot. But she had one more plan. Before impact, she released 3 decoy beacons. One carried a second ashfall signal. The other 2 mimicked escape pods. Then everything went dark. In the silence that followed, the Volker ships finished their attack. The last few transports were destroyed. They sent a message to their homeworld. The humans were nothing. The convoy is gone. But deep beneath the wreckage, hidden in shadows, something had survived. And Earth had received the signal. They didn't shout. They didn't beg. They began to prepare. Because now, it was war. When the last of the human convoy ships was destroyed, there was nothing but silence in the void. The Volker fleet had already turned away, satisfied with their brutal victory. They thought Earth would mourn, cry out for help, and beg for peace. They thought wrong. Back on Earth, it was a different story. General Vane, the leader of the Volker forces, didn't know what to expect. He had waited for the humans to call for negotiations or retreat into their corner, like they always had in the past. The Galactic Council had warned him, "Don't provoke humanity." But Vane didn't listen, and now he was about to learn why that was a huge mistake. When the Volker ship destroyed the convoy, a secret protocol was triggered deep inside Earth's military network. The moment Commander Rhea had sent the Ashfall signal, it went unnoticed by the enemy, but not by Earth's command. Earth's response was swift and silent. In a high-tech facility beneath the mountains of Alaska, Earth Command received the distress call. The walls buzzed with action as officers quickly relayed the information. A countdown clock appeared on every monitor. Trigger Operation Helix. The officials in charge knew they couldn't send an army to the Volker. They didn't have time. The Volker had already taken the bait, but what they had was something far more deadly than an army. A weapon the galaxy had never seen. Within minutes, General Tannic, head of Earth's covert operations, stood before a sleek, black ship. A ship so advanced it looked like it had come from another time, another place. The ship was called the Helix. It had no lights, no logos, and no markings. It was silent in every sense of the word. The only sound was the hum of its engines, which seemed to fade into the darkness around it. Helix was built in secret, hidden away from even the most powerful races in the galaxy. Earth had known for years that enemies like the Volker could attack at any moment, and so they had prepared. "Sir," one officer said, saluting General Tannic, "the ship is ready. All systems are online. But this ship is not built for negotiation. It's a tool of destruction." Tannic nodded, his face grim. "I know. But this is not a time for talks." With a quiet command, the Helix launched into space. Its sensors picked up the Volker fleet immediately. They were scattered across several systems, each fleet stretching far into the stars. But the Helix didn't blink. It didn't slow down. It simply moved toward the nearest fleet with terrifying speed. Back on the Volkerfly ship, Captain Joran Vane was watching the live feeds from the attack. His fleet was celebrating. The humans were weak after all. This mission would be a simple win. But something was wrong. Suddenly, the lights on his ship flickered, and the long-range sensors beeped loudly. They had detected something moving at incredible speed, something that wasn't supposed to be there. Something small, unmarked, and silent. "Report," Vane barked. The sensor officer's voice trembled. It's a human ship. It just appeared on our radar, sir. It's moving at near light speed." "What?" Vane turned sharply. "Impossible. Nothing can move that fast." The officer's eyes widened as the blip on the screen shifted positions again, right behind them. The Volker fleet began to panic. They tried to lock onto the human ship, but it was too fast. The ship wasn't following normal space-time laws. It bent reality itself, disappearing and reappearing like a ghost in the dark. Then, without warning, a volley of weapons fire erupted from the Helix, silent beams of light cutting through the space around them. Ships that were once proudly Volker vessels erupted into fireballs, their systems failing in an instant. "Full retreat," Vane shouted, but it was too late. One by one, Volker ships were destroyed in perfect silence. Their weapons didn't work. Their shields failed. The Helix attacked without warning, like a shadow in the dark, too fast for any counterattack. The Volker officers couldn't even get a message to their leaders. No one knew what was happening. Their ships were being destroyed, and there was nothing they could do about it. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Tannic watched the operation unfold from the command center. His eyes never left the screen. The Helix was doing exactly what it was built for, defending Earth in complete silence. "Are we sure they know it's over?" an officer asked. Tannic turned slowly. "They know now. The moment their ships went silent, they knew they had made a mistake." In the next few minutes, the last of the Volker fleet vanished. They had either been destroyed or had fled into deep space. No ships remained in the area where the convoy had been attacked. General Tannic looked at his officers, his face unreadable. "Prepare for the next step. Earth is no longer weak." The silence was deafening. On the Volker side, panic had begun to spread. Their fleet was broken. Their victory had been short-lived. General Vane, now desperate, sent an urgent message to the Galactic Council. "Humanity has changed. We provoked them, and now we pay the price." But the Council was already watching. They had been observing the attack and Earth's response from afar. They didn't speak. They didn't ask for a reason. They knew what was coming. And they feared what humanity might do next. The Volker thought they had won. They thought humans would be easy to crush. But they had awakened something dangerous. And now they were about to see just how far Earth would go to protect its own. A war had been started. But this wasn't a war anyone could win. The Volker fleet had scattered into the stars, but they weren't gone. The damage they had caused was severe, and General Vane knew it would take time for his forces to regroup. But there was no hiding from Earth's wrath now. Back in the deep void of space, hidden among the dark nebulae of the Farron cluster, Vane had found what he thought was a safe haven. His ship, the Vanguard, a massive war vessel, hovered silently behind a cloud of dust and asteroids. The remnants of the Volker fleet had gathered here, a broken, ragtag collection of ships licking their wounds. They had lost much, but Vane still had hope. Just a little. "Captain," said a low voice from behind him, "we've established a defensive perimeter. No one will find us here." Vane nodded, his face hardened with rage. "Good. We need time to rebuild. Time to regroup." His hands clenched the armrests of his command chair as he stared at the tactical map in front of him. The Volker forces had been shattered by the Helix, but they still had one last chance. If they could strike first, if they could take Earth by surprise, they might be able to turn the tide. "Send word to the Council," Vane said, his voice cold and dangerous. "Tell them Earth will pay. We will make them bleed." Meanwhile, back on Earth, General Tannic had already begun preparations for the next phase of the war. The Volker had retreated, but Tannic knew this was far from over. He had studied the Volker for years. They would regroup. They would come back stronger. Earth had to be ready. "Prepare the Helix for a second assault," Tannic commanded, "and get me the fleet. We're not giving them time to rebuild." But the Volker weren't the only ones preparing for war. In the heart of Earth's military command, high-ranking officers gathered around a holographic table. Among them was Commander Rhea, who had miraculously survived the ambush. She stood, listening as Tannic laid out his plans. "We've broken their fleet once," Rhea said, her voice steady. "But they'll come back. I've seen how they fight. We need to think bigger." Tannic turned to her. "What do you suggest?" Rhea paused for a moment, considering the stakes. "We can't just attack them head-on. We need to hit them where they least expect it. The Volker pride themselves on their strength, but they're arrogant. They'll never expect us to come at them from a place of silence." Tannic looked at her intrigued. "What are you thinking?" "We take the fight to their heart," Rhea said. "I'm talking about infiltrating their capital. The Volker homeworld. We go in silently like shadows. No one will know we're there until it's too late." The room went silent. The plan was risky, but if it worked, it would cripple the Volker once and for all. Tannic gave a sharp nod. "Make it happen. I want that operation ready in 48 hours. No more waiting." As the planning continued, the Volker, now fully aware of Earth's resolves, set their own plans into motion. General Vane had not given up. The loss was painful, but the Volker had always been a war-driven species. Pain only made them stronger. They would hunt down humanity wherever they went. The Volker had one last advantage. They had a hidden weapon, something that had been in development for years. It was their ace in the hole. A massive super-weapon capable of destroying entire fleets in a single strike. The Dreadfire. The Dreadfire was a weapon unlike anything humanity had ever faced. A massive battle station hidden within the asteroid fields of the Zakar Nebula. It was armed with enough firepower to decimate any ship that dared to approach. Vane was willing to risk everything on this weapon. He knew if the Dreadfire worked, it could obliterate Earth's fleet and turn the tide in favor of the Volkir. But there was a catch. Getting to the Dreadfire would be nearly impossible. The asteroid fields surrounding it were filled with deadly mines, and the Volkir fleet would have to navigate through them in complete silence to avoid detection. "We move out at once," Vane commanded, standing tall. "This is our last chance. If we fail, the Volkir will never rise again." The Volkir fleet moved in the dead of space, each ship cloaked and silent. They would not make the same mistake twice. They would get to the Dreadfire and use it to destroy humanity. Back on Earth, Rhea and Tannic watched the Volkir's movements. They knew the Volkir were planning something big, and the Dreadfire was likely their last card to play. Rhea knew they had no time to waste. Earth had to strike first. "We can't wait for them to make the first move," Rhea said, as the fleet prepared to depart for the Volkir's capital. "We need to take the fight to them now." Tannic nodded, his eyes filled with resolve. "Agreed. But remember, Rhea, we're not just fighting to survive anymore. We're fighting to win." As the Earth fleet began its final preparations, the Volkir fleet slowly made its way toward the Dreadfire. Both sides were preparing for the most dangerous confrontation of the war, unaware that the first strike would come from an unexpected source, a source that would change everything. The battle for survival was about to reach its peak. But in the cold, silent reaches of space, no one could predict what the next move would be. The tension in space was palpable. Both the Earth fleet and the Volkir forces were on the brink of a clash that would determine the fate of the war. But what neither side knew was that the true battle wasn't going to happen where they expected. It was going to happen in the shadows of the Zakar Nebula, where the Dreadfire lay waiting. On Earth's side, General Tannic stood at the helm of the Helix, his eyes scanning the dark expanse of space on the holographic display in front of him. The operation to infiltrate the Volkir capital was still underway, but Rhea's warning echoed in his mind. They couldn't afford to wait much longer. "We've detected an anomaly," one of Tannic's officers spoke, breaking the silence in the command room. "What kind of anomaly?" Tannic asked, his voice calm but alert. "Something's moving toward the Zakar Nebula," the officer replied. "It's large, and it's moving silently." Tannic's heart skipped a beat. The Volkir fleet. He had known they would make a move soon, but this wasn't just a small skirmish. It was something much bigger. "Are we certain it's them?" Tannic asked, his mind racing through the possibilities. The officer studied the readings carefully. "Yes, sir. It's the Volkir. Their fleet is headed straight for the Dreadfire." Tannic's eyes narrowed. The Dreadfire was the Volkir's secret weapon, a massive space station capable of wiping out entire fleets in seconds. He had heard rumors about it, but he had never thought the Volkir would risk bringing it into play this early. "Rhea, we need to move out," Tannic commanded. "Prepare the fleet for immediate departure. We're going to intercept them before they can reach the Dreadfire." Meanwhile, on the Volkir flagship, General Vane was confident. He had placed everything on the line for the Dreadfire, and now it was his last hope to win the war. His fleet had managed to sneak past Earth's defenses, making their way undetected through the asteroid field that surrounded the Zakar Nebula. Vane stood before the holographic map of the sector, his fingers drumming against the table. "We're almost there," he muttered. "Once we activate the Dreadfire, no one will stand in our way." "Sir," a Volkir officer spoke up, "there's a problem. We've detected a fleet. It's moving toward us. It's the humans." Vane's face tightened. He hadn't expected the humans to respond so quickly. "Impossible," he growled. "They shouldn't have found us yet. How did they detect us?" The officer looked nervous. It's the Helix." They've deployed it. It's moving faster than we expected. It's closing in on us. Vane's anger flared. The Helix was the one ship that terrified him. He knew it could easily dismantle his fleet in a matter of minutes. Prepare the fleet for battle. Vane ordered. Activate the Dreadfire. We'll use it to wipe them out before they get any closer. In the cold depths of space, the Helix cut through the void, its sleek design almost invisible against the backdrop of the stars. Tanik's voice came over the intercom, calm but firm. Helix fleet, engage the Volker on my mark. Target their rear ships. We need to draw them away from the Dreadfire long enough for our strike force to move in. The officers aboard the Helix acknowledged the orders, preparing their ships for battle. Rhea stood at Tanik's side, her expression determined. This will be our hardest fight yet, she said. But if we can keep the Dreadfire from firing, we can win this. Tanik nodded. We will. We have no choice. As the two fleets closed in on each other, the quiet of space was broken by the sudden flare of weapons fire. The Volker fleet, now fully engaged, unleashed a barrage of missiles and plasma beams toward the approaching Earth fleet. The Helix moved with astonishing speed, dodging the incoming fire with ease, while other Earth ships launched their counterattacks, sending waves of fire back toward the Volker. But the real threat was the Dreadfire. In the distance, the massive space station came online, its weapons primed and ready to fire. The Volker had done it. They had activated the super weapon. Tanik's heart raced as he watched the Dreadfire come into focus on the sensors. The sheer size of it was intimidating. It was unlike anything the Earth fleet had ever faced. But Tanik knew one thing: if the Dreadfire fired, it would be over. He had to stop it. Rhea, now, Tanik shouted. The Helix and the Earth fleet focused their fire on the Volker ships, pulling them into a deadly dance of evasive maneuvers and counterattacks. But they had one goal: to get close enough to the Dreadfire to disable it before it could be used. The Volker fleet, however, was relentless. General Vane refused to back down, firing everything he had. His flagship Vanguard was on the front lines, taking the brunt of Earth's assault. Vane knew this was a fight to the death. Either he would destroy Earth, or Earth would destroy him. Then, with a sudden flash, the Dreadfire fired its first shot. A massive beam of energy shot from the station, cutting through the space between the two fleets. The blast was so powerful that it rocked the Helix to its core, shaking the entire ship. Tanik barely held onto his seat. Rhea, move us now, he ordered. The Helix swerved at the last moment, avoiding the second shot just in time. But the battle was far from over. The Earth fleet had to keep the Volker distracted long enough to get close enough to the Dreadfire and disable its weapons before it could fire again. In the heart of the battle, General Vane watched in disbelief as Earth's fleet closed in. He had underestimated them. He had made a mistake. The Dreadfire was powerful, but it wasn't invincible. And now, Earth was about to prove it. The final confrontation had begun. In Part 5, everything would come to a head. The fate of the war, the Dreadfire, and the future of humanity would all be decided in the next few minutes. Could Earth survive the onslaught of the Volker's final weapon, or would the Dreadfire prove to be humanity's undoing? The battle in deep space had reached its boiling point. Both fleets were locked in a deadly confrontation, and the fate of humanity hung in the balance. The Helix and the Volker fleet were now within striking distance of the Dreadfire, the massive weapon that had the potential to obliterate them all. But there was still hope. General Tanik knew that the only way to win was to take down the Dreadfire before it could unleash another devastating shot. The Helix had dodged the first blast, but the Dreadfire wasn't finished yet. Its weapons were recharging, and with every second, the threat grew stronger. Tanik could feel the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Every move, every command could mean the difference between survival and extinction. Rhea, Tanik said, his voice steady but tinged with urgency, prepare the special weapon. We're going to disable the Dreadfire once and for all. Rhea's eyes flashed with determination. We have one shot at this, she replied. The team's ready. but we can't afford any mistakes. If we miss, the Dreadfire will take us all down. Tanik nodded. We won't miss. The Helix and the rest of Earth's fleet were now within striking range of the Vulcar ships, but they weren't the real target. The real mission was the Dreadfire, and getting close enough to launch the special weapon was the only way to disable it. Helix fleet, focus all fire on the Vulcar's flagship. Tanik commanded. We need to create a distraction. Take out the Vanguard, and we'll have a clear shot at the Dreadfire. The Earth fleet responded immediately, pouring all their firepower into the Vanguard, the Vulcar flagship. Explosions lit up the dark void of space as missiles, plasma beams, and energy blasts collided with the enemy vessel. The Vanguard shook under the barrage, but it wasn't enough to stop it. General Vane, determined to protect the Dreadfire, barked orders to his fleet. Return fire, he shouted. Do not let them near the Dreadfire. We need to hold them off at all costs. But the Vulcar fleet was spread thin. The Earth ships were relentless, keeping the pressure on and forcing Vane to split his forces. The Dreadfire still loomed in the distance, its massive silhouette casting a shadow over the entire battlefield. Tanik knew they didn't have much time. The Dreadfire was ready to fire again. Rhea, launch the weapon now, Tanik ordered. Rhea's fingers flew over the console as the Helix rocketed toward the Dreadfire. The special weapon was designed to disrupt the Dreadfire's energy core, rendering its weapons useless for good. It was a risky maneuver. If they missed, they would be sitting ducks. But they had no other choice. The Helix streaked through the blackness, avoiding fire from the Vulcar ships and drawing closer to the massive space station. The seconds stretched on forever, each one feeling like an eternity. Ready, target locked, Rhea said, her voice barely audible over the tension. Tanik held his breath. With one final command, Rhea launched the weapon. It shot forward, a glowing projectile aimed directly at the heart of the Dreadfire. Time seemed to slow as the weapon sped toward its target, and then, boom! The Dreadfire erupted in a blinding flash of light. The energy core inside the station had been hit, and the weapon's devastating power was now neutralized. For a moment, everything was silent. The Vulcar ships paused, confused and disoriented. Tanik's heart raced. It was working. The Dreadfire was no longer a threat. But then the Vulcar forces didn't surrender. They'd fought on, furious, with General Vane screaming orders from his flagship. He wasn't ready to give up, not yet. The Earth fleet was weakened, and if the Vulcar could regroup, they could still turn the tide. Tanik wasn't about to let that happen. He knew this was their only chance to end the war once and for all. All units full assault, he commanded. We finish this now. The Earth fleet surged forward with renewed strength, targeting the remaining Vulcar ships. The Helix led the charge, its weapons firing relentlessly as it tore through the Vulcar fleet. The tide of the battle had turned, but the Vulcar were desperate, and their forces fought fiercely. In the chaos, General Vane stood at the command center of the Vanguard, watching as his fleet crumbled around him. His flagship was heavily damaged, and his crew was scattered. He could feel defeat creeping in. We cannot let them win, he muttered to himself. But he knew in his heart it was over. With the Dreadfire neutralized and the Vulcar fleet scattered, the final blow came. The Vanguard was destroyed in a massive explosion, taking General Vane with it. The remaining Vulcar ships surrendered or fled, their morale shattered. Tanik watched from the bridge of the Helix as the last of the Vulcar forces retreated into the depths of space. The war was over. Earth had won. Rhea stood beside him, her face weary but proud. We did it, she said softly. Tanik nodded, his gaze fixed on the stars ahead. We've only just begun. The victory in space was just the beginning of a new era for humanity. With the Vulcar defeated, Earth would have a chance to rebuild, to rise as a dominant force in the galaxy. And for the first time in a long while, General Tanik allowed himself to believe in the future. Epilogue. A New Dawn. As the remnants of the Vulcan fleet drifted into the void, Earth began its recovery. The war had been brutal, but humanity had emerged victorious. The Dreadfire had been destroyed, and the Vulcan were no longer a threat. But Tannic knew that peace was never permanent. New challenges would arise, and new enemies would come. Yet in the silence that followed the battle, he felt a sense of hope for the first time in years. Humanity had survived, and now humanity would dominate the stars. The war was over. The battle had been won. Earth had emerged victorious, and the fleet was returning home after the brutal conflict. But General Tannic knew that this peace was fragile, and though the Vulcan had been defeated, the universe was still full of uncertainties. As the Helix and the remaining Earth fleet ships made their way back to Earth, the crew couldn't help but feel the weight of their victory. The war had taken its toll, and many lives had been lost. The survivors were tired, battle-worn but proud. Humanity had proven itself to be stronger than the Vulcan had ever imagined. Tannic sat alone in his quarters, gazing out the viewport at the stars. His mind wandered back to the battle. The Dreadfire had been destroyed, but in the chaos, something had felt off. There had been a moment just before the Dreadfire exploded, when he saw a flash of something strange in the distance, an anomaly in the void. It had been brief, almost too quick to register. But he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. General Tannic, a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Rhea, her face serious. We need to talk. Tannic turned to her, sensing the urgency in her tone. What is it? Rhea stepped closer, a data pad in her hand. She handed it to Tannic, and he took it, his eyes scanning the report. It was a message from the Helix's long-range sensors, and it was not good news. The Dreadfire wasn't the only weapon they had, Rhea said, her voice steady but filled with concern. We've detected something else. Something bigger. Tannic's brow furrowed as he read the data. It showed an anomaly, but not the same one he had seen earlier. This one was far more ominous. It was a massive ship, unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Its energy readings were off the charts, impossible to ignore, impossible to fathom. How long until we reach Earth? Tannic asked, his mind racing. 2 days, Rhea replied. We need to get back to Earth immediately. Prepare the fleet for a secondary mission, Tannic ordered, his voice cold with realization. This isn't over. The Vulcan might have fallen, but they weren't acting alone. Rhea's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Tannic's expression hardened. I think the Vulcan were just the tip of the iceberg. Whoever sent that ship, they might be preparing for something much larger. As the fleet continued its journey home, the crew remained on high alert. Tannic's mind was occupied by the unknown threat, and Rhea worked tirelessly with the rest of the command staff to assess the new anomaly. But deep down, Tannic could feel the tension building. There was something they weren't seeing yet, something that was still out there. The days passed slowly, and as they neared Earth's orbit, Tannic and his team had already begun planning their next move. But the closer they got, the more they realized just how little they truly knew about the vast galaxy around them. On Earth, the mood was one of cautious optimism. People celebrated the victory, knowing that the Vulcan threat was gone. But the government and military knew the truth. There were still dangers lurking in the depths of space. The war had only been the beginning. Tannic's orders were clear. Earth had to be ready. They couldn't afford to rest. Not yet. As the fleet entered Earth's atmosphere and the ships began to land, Tannic stood before his team in the command center, his expression grim. He addressed the crew one last time before they were discharged to their posts. I know we've been through hell, he said, his voice steady but filled with the weight of leadership. But there's something out there, something bigger than the Vulcan. We've survived their war, but we're not done yet. We're going to need every bit of strength, every bit of courage we have to face what's coming. The future of humanity depends on it. Rhea stood beside him, her expression resolute. We're ready. We'll fight until the end, just like we always have. Tanik nodded, his eyes filled with a quiet determination. Then we prepare for what comes next. Epilogue: The Next Frontier. As the fleet returned to Earth, a new chapter began. Earth's victory over the Volker was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and the dangers were ever present. General Tanik and his team knew that peace was fleeting, and humanity's place in the stars was still uncertain. But one thing was clear: Earth would not back down. The message was simple yet powerful. Humanity had faced its first true test and had come out victorious. But in the depths of space, there were always new threats waiting. The battle was far from over. And as Tanik stood looking out over Earth from the command deck, he understood that the next war, whatever it might be, would be humanity's greatest challenge yet. They would face it with strength, unity, and the same indomitable spirit that had carried them through this war. The future was uncertain, but humanity had a place in it, one that would never be threatened again. And so they waited. The next frontier was just beyond the horizon. The days after Earth's victorious return were a blur of celebrations, but General Tanik couldn't afford to relax. He kept thinking about that anomaly, that strange, massive ship that had been detected. His gut told him it wasn't over, and the more he thought about it, the more certain he became. The Volker may have been defeated, but whoever or whatever was behind them was still lurking in the shadows. The briefing room was quiet, the only sound the faint hum of machinery. Tanik stood at the front, his eyes scanning the faces of his most trusted officers. Rhea stood beside him, her expression stern just as determined. The stakes had never been higher. "We've been given a moment of peace," Tanik began, his voice calm but resolute. "But we know how fragile that peace is. We've seen the evidence. There is something out there. Something that might make the Volker look like a small inconvenience." Rhea stepped forward, activating the large holographic screen behind them. It displayed an image of the anomaly, a massive ship, dark and ominous, its energy readings incomprehensible. "This is the same ship we detected during the battle," she said. "It's enormous, and its power far surpasses anything we've encountered. And the most unsettling part? We've identified its origins." Tanik's eyes narrowed. "Where is it from?" Rhea hesitated for a moment, the weight of her next words heavy in the room. "It's not from any galaxy we know. Its design doesn't match anything in the Volker's arsenal. We believe it's a part of a much older race, one that predates even the Volker. A race known only as the Ethelists." A hushed silence filled the room. Tanik could feel the tension rising. The Ethelists were a myth, ancient legends spoken of in hushed whispers. But if what Rhea was saying was true, the myths were far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. "Who are they?" Tanik asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "They were once a powerful empire, long thought to have fallen into extinction," Rhea explained. "But from what we've gathered, their technology is far more advanced than even the Volkers. And their motives, if they've been behind the Volkers' invasion, are still unknown. But we do know one thing. They're coming, and they're bringing war." Tanik paced the room, his mind racing. "We need to be ready. We've only begun to scratch the surface of what's out there." Rhea nodded. "We've already begun gathering intelligence. The Helix is preparing for deep space reconnaissance missions, but we'll need more ships, more technology. We'll need allies." Tanik stopped pacing, his gaze fixed on the hologram. The Athelists, an ancient and powerful force, were coming. They hadn't just fought the Volker. This was the real battle, the one that would define humanity's future in the galaxy. "We'll need everything we've got," Tanik said. "This isn't just about Earth anymore. This is about the survival of all humanity. We'll need to build alliances, share our technology, and prepare for war on a scale we've never imagined." The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Earth's first victory had been hard won, but now the true test was ahead. They were no longer just fighting for survival against one enemy. Now they were facing an ancient race with the power to erase civilizations. "What's the first step?" one of the officers asked. Tanik turned to face the room, his eyes filled with the fire of determination. The first step is to show the Ethelists that humanity will never be crushed. We'll make them understand that Earth has a place in this galaxy. A place we'll fight for, no matter the cost. The officers nodded, their resolve matching Tanik's. The battle had changed. They had won the war, but a far greater challenge loomed on the horizon. Ria's voice was steady, but the concern in her eyes was undeniable. What if they're more powerful than we imagine? Tanik's gaze softened slightly, but his voice was unwavering. Then we'll make them understand why humanity is worth fighting for. We've already defeated the odds once. We can do it again. As the meeting ended, Tanik stood at the front, staring out the window of the command center. The stars twinkled like distant promises, but the silence that followed only served to amplify the weight of what was to come. Humanity had fought hard to get to this point. They had stood together against the Volkir, and now they would stand together against an ancient enemy far more dangerous. Tanik knew the journey ahead would be perilous, but if there was one thing the Earth fleet had proven, it was that they would never give up. The war against the Ethelists had not yet begun, but it would, and when it did, humanity would be ready. Epilogue: The Call to Arms. The fleet assembled in orbit, each ship glimmering under the vast sky. The Helix, now a symbol of humanity's resilience, stood ready for its next mission. Tanik stood at the helm, his eyes focused on the stars ahead. The threat of the Ethelists was real, and the unknown stretched before them like a vast, uncharted ocean. But humanity had made it this far, and they would not stop. Ria approached him, her expression a mix of determination and resolve. "We've done everything we can, General. The fleet's ready for the first step." Tanik gave a single nod. "Then let's go. Let's show them that Earth will never be forgotten." The fleet ignited its engines, and as it sailed into the stars, the final words Tanik spoke echoed in the minds of all those aboard. Humanity will dominate the stars, and no one will ever take that away from us. The future was unknown, but Earth was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead.